Hello, everyone. My name is Janice Silva. Today, we are going to talk about nonverbal communication. I think we can all agree that good communication skills are critical skills for anyone wanting to advance in their professional careers. And even beyond that, good communication skills can also help us in our personal lives. Case in point, the other day, my husband and I were having a very serious conversation. And as he was being so animated telling me all about it, he suddenly pauses and he says, "Don't look at me like that." And it really took me aback because I wasn't doing anything. I was literally just sitting there and paying attention. So I asked him, "Don't look at you like what?" And perhaps it's how my face was contorted or my body language. It was sending him a message that I wasn't agreeing or I had some opinions that I'm itching to tell him. In this discussion, we will dig a little deeper and explore what message we communicate beyond the words that we say. But first, let's go back to our perception of what communication is. Typically, when someone says communication, we almost always believe that they're referring to our words and sentences, nouns, verbs, all those other typical things we can write down. But in reality, human communication is so much more complex and deeper than that. It includes the variations in our tone, our emphasis for every word that gives it different meanings. It includes other signals we send out, such as our facial expressions, eye contact or the lack of eye contact, and even hand gestures. According to Patty Wood, a body language expert and the author of the book Snap, Making the Most of First Impressions, Body Language, and Charisma, you might be saying one or two words, but giving off thousands of nonverbal cues. These nonverbal cues, which include everything from your posture to your expression, are crucial to any interaction. And it's especially important to project the correct cues to communicate our message correctly. In fact, research shows that only approximately 5% of our personal messages are conveyed by words. The next 20% is by the tone of our voice, and the rest of the 75% is by facial expressions and body language. This means 95% of our communication is conveyed non verbally. So this brings us to the question, what exactly are considered nonverbal communication? The most common thing we hear is the tone of the voice, facial expressions, and we observe that in interactions. Say, for example, a friend comes back from a vacation and they say, "You had a great time at the beach." Well, we're not entirely convinced because their voice is flat and their face lacks the emotion or the excitement. So, this is telling us that our nonverbal communication, if not aligned with our spoken words, then it makes our message mixed or muddled. It will not resonate at all. Our message will literally be lost in translation. And nonverbal communication involves many different channels that convey meaning beyond what's being said. We've grouped this into the seven types of nonverbal communication. The first one is called kinesics, and this is our body movements, which includes our facial expressions, eye contact. Our bodies communicate messages in several ways. A good example, and shown in this picture, is our posture. The way we sit at our desk when we're working sends the message to our boss and our coworkers about our state of mind for the day. Are we fully present? Are we slumped forward because we're tired? Good communicators are sensitive to these small cues and they tailor their behavior accordingly. And the awareness of these subtle messages can make the difference between success and failure in a variety of business settings, like in interviews, presentations, group meetings, and one on one interactions. The next one is called vocalics, and that's literally our vocals, our voice, how loud we speak, how fast we speak, the pitch, the timbre. We probably share the same experience on how the voice communicates in a way that have very little to do with the actual words that the speaker is really saying. For instance, to illustrate, when we overhear two people arguing, even though we couldn't make out the actual words they're saying to each other, their emotions and the fact that they're arguing will be apparent from the sound of their voice. This is similar when we overhear people talking in a different language, yet we don't understand them, yet the speaker's feelings, if they're excited, they're delighted, they're exhausted, they're bored, or they're grieving, this will be conveyed by their voices. I'd like to point out in this slide the female figure in the middle. She has a phone pressed to her ear and she's saying, "How may I help you?" How do you think she sounds on the other end of the line? Her left arm is already holding her purse and her right arm is already inside her jacket. I can only imagine that her tone, her voice would sound really rushed trying to get off the phone so she could leave the office. The next one is physical environment, and this includes artifacts, the objects that compose it. The physical environment in which we operate also suggests how we feel and it shapes how we communicate. In this picture, this gentleman, I keep picking on him. He has a messy desk. There's stack of papers. There's clutter. It sends a signal of disorganization, or maybe they're just simply swamped with work. In many organizations, for example, as another way to look at physical environment as nonverbal communication, is an employee's status may be measured whether his or her office is next to the boss or if it's in a dark alcove. An office with a window or an office in a corner often indicates higher status than an inside office with no window. The next one is proxemics, and this is the proximity or the personal space. The distance we put between ourselves and others also reflects feelings and attitudes, and thus it affects communication. So, depending on how close they are, we could assume if it's an intimate conversation, is it a casual discussion, is it social, or if it's a public discussion. And very closely related to that is the haptics or touch. That includes handshakes, holding hands, kissing on the cheeks versus the lips and the hand. Those three have very different meanings. We could give a backslap, a high five when we're agreeing on something or we achieve something together, or when a boss gives somebody a pat on the back for a job well done. Then we have chronemics or time. The way we use time provides a number of silent messages. In fact, many business advisors recommend that if you're just starting your job, that you be particularly scrupulous about the use of your time. It really reflects and sends the message about your diligence, your discipline, and how you value and respect other people's time. If you're always tardy, do you arrive at meetings on time, or are you always late? Do you cancel on meetings? Do you meet deadlines? So your consciousness and time management. And finally, the last one is the personal appearance. And this is really a little touchy because a lot of people would probably say we don't want to judge a book by its cover. But we have to acknowledge the reality in a business environment that physical appearance, the way we dress, how we present ourselves, plays a tremendous role in determining how our message is going to be accommodated or accepted. The kind of clothing one wears can influence how people react, and the clothing one wears depending on several factors, the industry or the field of work. A good example is I work in healthcare in a medical office. If somebody walks in to take my blood or give me a medical exam and they do not look neat and clean or they're unkempt, I would question their credibility and their ability to do the job well. And if I am mistaken and they are really good at their job, it is a discredit to their skills because how they present themselves through their personal appearance. On these next slides, we will play a little game. Now that we know all the different channels of nonverbal communication, we'll look at each photo thoroughly. We'll observe what we see and we'll try to interpret what message it's sending us. And let's start with this one. We see four individuals sitting, they're facing up front. It looks like, or we could just assume that somebody is presenting. They're sitting upright. Some of them are taking down notes. They look really focused. And what is this telling us just by looking, not even hearing what they're talking about? By sitting upright, I could assume that they're alert and present and they're ready to take on the challenges of the day. With them taking notes, it sends the message that they're paying attention. It demonstrates that they are engaged and they care about what the other person is saying because they're really jotting down the words or some keywords that is being discussed. And they also look really focused, and that suggests that they're interested. Perhaps the topic is being delivered in a very engaging way, or it is relevant to them. On this photo, when I first looked at it, I was wondering, are they giving each other a peace sign? Then I observed on the counter that there's Chinese letterings, or I think it's Chinese. So we would assume that it's a foreign country. So they're doing hand gestures for them to understand each other. And it's saying that he wants two of something. And I wonder, do you think they understand each other? You know what? I think they do. I could see that they're having eye contact. She's mimicking his gestures, saying that it's two, to say that she comprehends and she's reaffirming that he wants two of the goodies that he wants to buy. And I'm saying that he wants to buy them because his right hand is already gesturing towards his pocket, which is a universal language of, yes, I'm pulling my wallet to pay. Now, this next picture is really funny. It's a bit extreme, but I think for the sake of discussion, it delivers the message. We see some people sleeping or yawning, and the rest who are still awake are looking extremely bored. Now, what does it tell us? Number one, that they're not interested. And if the speaker in blue, right in front, would just turn around away from the screen, he will notice that the audience are no longer interested and that they're not engaged. Now, let's move on to the next picture. We see the male person on the right holding his head. What else? The female on the left has some hand gestures. And we see a closed laptop in between them. Now, what does this tell us? By holding his head, maybe he has a headache or he's worried or not happy. And because he's worried or not happy, she's explaining or justifying it. And based on the closed laptop, if I'm walking by and I see this exchange without even hearing what they're saying, I would conclude, oh my gosh, that meeting did not end well. Now let's go to the last. And finally, this is our last photo. In this picture, we see that the gentleman in the middle has very unkempt hair. And the people behind him are covering their noses to signal that he might have some body odor. And he's coming to work with disheveled clothing. His tie is askew, his clothes are not ironed. And what is this telling us? He could be the best worker, but just by looking at him that way, we would presume that he is unprofessional or that he does not care. After looking at all those five photos, I think we can all agree that a lot can be said without words in any given interaction. Often, our nonverbal communication, like our facial expressions, body posture, eye contact, etc., these are the ones that speak the loudest. These nonverbal cues play a huge role in how our words and our intentions are actually interpreted. By now, we've established how important nonverbal communication is. So, the next step is to find ways to improve our nonverbal communication. And I've narrowed it down to three big buckets. And if there's three things that I'd like you to walk away with in this presentation, it would be these three tips in improving your nonverbal effectiveness. The first one is to monitor your nonverbal behavior. One study found that low self monitors were blissfully ignorant of their shortcomings and were more likely to overestimate their communication skills. So, this one is all about self awareness. This can help you manage your nonverbal behavior. For example, in a meeting or if you're delivering a presentation, you might catch yourself droning on and losing your audience. When dealing with a difficult situation, your mental alarm will typically go off if you're losing your patience and showing irritation. So be aware of that. Keep an eye on how you may look and sound to others, and this will really enhance your image as a professional. The next one is to demonstrate interest in others. It's not all about you. An interaction entails listening and putting in the time and the effort to understand the other person as well. So it's all about paying attention. Pay close attention to what the person says. Show that you're interested and that your focus is on them. And finally, observe conventions. It is very important to note that some nonverbal communications are cultural. So learn the culture. For example, in Northern Europe, you can expect to greet associates with a handshake, while in Latin America or perhaps other countries in Mediterranean, they would typically give a hug or even a kiss in the cheek that would be considered appropriate. Likewise, a non observant Western woman traveling in an Islamic country probably would dress more conservatively and be more likely to wear a head covering than she would be at home. Some nonverbal conventions are just as strong within certain fields of organizations. The style of dress with personal trainers, for example, or a website designer, they're all very different depending on the field of work, the culture of their organization, and all that. So, again, three things that I really want you to walk away with to improve your nonverbal effectiveness is self-awareness. Be aware of yourself, your own mannerisms, and how your actions may be misinterpreted. Number two is to pay attention. Focus on the other person you interact with. And finally, number three, be aware of your environment and the culture. I'm adding this extra slide because nonverbal communication is also present in work related digital conversations. This is especially important in the age that we are now in technology, where all our communication or most of our communication at work is being done with hashtags by email, tweets, and text messages. And this means that with digital communication, while it's fast and convenient, it really lacks that 95% of the signals transmitted through face to face communication. So it is more likely that our messages are misinterpreted because we don't have the body language, we don't have the facial expressions or the tone. Write emails. And I'm actually inserting this in this discussion because in the business environment, we use emails all too much. We use it for most of our communications, and a lot of people don't realize how we communicate with each other in email, that 5% of our messages are conveyed through words, and in this email we lose 95% of our communication elements. So it's really important that we pay attention to how and what we write. So some do's: watch the tone of your email to make sure it will be perceived as you intend. So keep tabs on the tone of your email to make sure it will be perceived with what you're trying to say. You could even try reading it out loud before sending. Pay attention to replying to all or just one person. And this is really one of my pet peeve, and I'm sure you've experienced. In one day, there's just so many emails because everyone's saying thank you to a group message or a distribution list, which is so inappropriate. And finally, if you're emailing someone, never write anything that you would not want others to read. Always assume that your email may be forwarded and may be used against you. So, email with care. Follow good email etiquette. It's a way to make sure that we show value and respect and contribute to a good working relationship, and not send messages that may be misconstrued or misinterpreted. And so, with that, what we're really I'd like to end this presentation with this really cute video, which really captures everything that we discussed today. That it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Are you back? Is this my car? State Farm knows that for every one of those moments, this is ridiculous! There's one of these.
Is this my car? What? This is ridiculous.
This can't be happening!
This can't be happening.
Oh, it's happening, sweetheart.
Oh, it's happening, sweetheart. Shut up!
Shut up!
Ah!
That's why State Farm is there.
What a day.
With car insurance for when things...
So, in that video, we saw two individuals saying exactly the same words, but those words carry different meanings because of their body language and the tone of their voice. So, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you learned something from our discussion today. And my hope is that you set yourself up for success by using nonverbal communication to your advantage, by using your nonverbal tools mindfully and deliberately to reinforce your message. This would lift the value of your communication and your value as a leader. Thank you again, and have a good one.